Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Having worked with and for quite a few well-known brands, I've often looked at the churn and burn counts of companies going through customers. While they may be great at attracting new customers, serving them well and providing them with a great experience can be a significant challenge for many when thinking growth. But while brands have their own culture, the people they hire that serve your customers all come from unique backgrounds. And while culture and experience is top of mind these days with brands, today's guest points out that many leaders simply think that customer service is common sense. But with unique experiences we each have serving those customers, is it more uncommon than common? Laurie Guest is a keynote speaker, entrepreneur, an authority on customer service excellence, and author of The 10-Cent Decision, How Small Change Pays Off Big. And on this episode, we'll discuss customer service and customer experience, the four rings, the baker, the cashier spitting in your cake, 10-cent decisions, bottled water props and humor and presentations, virtual and in person, applause at dinner time, golf course moments, social media and being a speaker, value meal number one, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a customer service expert with a shark who serves you all on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date.
Oh, absolutely. I actually started out in healthcare, and all of a sudden we had competition coming to us and saying, how did we get such phenomenal level of customer service? And this was many years. My doctor looked around the office and he points at me and he goes, Laurie, you like to talk. Why don't you? And so I went out and started teaching others what our secrets were. And all of a sudden I realized that there was a whole world out there of sharing customer service excellence and being paid for it. So I've been doing this about 23 years and own and run my own speaking and training company. So that's the short version of how I ended up here, Shark.
Well, define, if you will, what you think of as customer service as well, because you talk about the role you had it in is a little bit different, but completely the same as a lot of customer service centers that may have a farm of hundreds of people answering phone calls from nasty customers. What is customer service today? Sort of encapsulate that with how industries look at it.
Well, I think it's an excellent question, and that what do we really mean by customer service? And I think there's a difference between service and experience.
Yes.
To me, customer service is the bare minimum to make the transaction go. And I don't care what industry you're in, people are people. So whether we are marketing healthcare or shoes, it's the same difference. People want their transaction completed in the way that they appreciate. But customer experience, which is more of what I do, is how can we take it then to the next level, which makes them happy customers that go out and recommend or repeat business. And that's how we grow. Whether small, medium, or large business, we grow on word of mouth. We all know that. You can market all you want, but it's the word on the street, the walking billboards, that make the difference. And I think that's where my work is a little bit different, from transactional to relationship based.
And I focus a lot of my own presentations on business growth. But if I told you something that I feared the most from where business is going, especially during the pandemic, it's not marketing technology, it's not sales leadership, it's not finance, it's not even workplace diversity is a hot topic. It's probably what moves the needle the most is customer experience today, as well as customer service, and how people are serving their customers. And it's a fear to me that people within businesses are not taking experience and service leadership, not necessarily to the next level, to a level that we all expect today. Are you seeing that on your own and how it's resonating with the audiences that you serve?
I do. And I don't think it's that owners and managers don't care about the experience.
Agreed.
I think it's more about a matter of don't have the time and don't know how to teach it, which is really the foundation of what I do. And so let's break it into the two parts. The first of don't have the time. They're really focused on the expected product and the generic product. In other words, if you think of four rings, and you've probably heard this before, but I think it's good to use that as our foundation, like a bullseye. The very center of the bullseye is your generic product and service. So if you're McDonald's, your product is fast food. That's what you're most concerned about. And then our next string out is what the customer expects. So in a McDonald's example, they expect it what? Hot, cheap, standardized. That's what we expect. We don't even expect it to be good. We just want it to be fast and we can eat it in our car when we're moving. That's where a majority of businesses spend all their time, is in those first 2 rings, generic and expected. But I push people to go to the next 2 rings. The third one is your augmented product. These are the things that you could be doing, right? But you don't have to. So for example of that, staying with the McDonald's, is they don't have to offer Happy Meals. They don't have to offer free refills. They don't have to have a playland. Those are things that they added as an augmented product and service. And that's where we need to get to. And then the 4th ring is the potential. This is where the fun is, and very few people go there. These are the things that we could do that nobody's ever thought of. Mm-hmm. And this is where you go and experience a product or a service of some kind, and you walk out going, oh, why didn't I think of that? That is an absolutely brilliant idea. And now that gets you talking. So in a very short way of explaining myself is that people spend all their time on those first 2 rings, and I'm pushing them to get to the outer 2 rings, your augmented and your potential.
Amen to that. So I knew of you and your work as a speaker. And I heard you on several podcasts, including with some friends of ours like Jay Baer. What you said really made me want to do this show. Very witty and funny. How did you come to a point where you realized I want to take my work experience in healthcare to apply thought leadership out into the market? Was it because of the fun of speaking, or was it because of what you needed to tell the world as to help change customer service and customer experience?
Yeah, my experience to end up here where I am today as a successful speaker and trainer was really like walking into a cold pool really, really slow. So it took me probably at least 15 years to get to the deep end by starting just 1 little inch at a time. So the answer to your question is, I started out speaking because I was asked by my boss when I was working for somebody else to go out and share the knowledge, but it was all knowledge that I didn't create. It wasn't my intellectual property. I was just the mouth behind it. And then I started noticing that I could come up with my own unique twist of how to explain it, whether to deliver it in a fun way that made people say, oh my gosh, we want her back, or if it's the way that I translated it into a metaphor that people could connect with. And that's when I first started realizing that I could do something different. And it's when people walked up and said, wow, I've never heard it explained that way. Can you come and do that at our organization? And if people will really listen to what your customer is asking you for and what they compliment you on, that gives you the answer of where you can go from here. If you're done doing your job, whether it's as a speaker or, again, I always use selling shoes, you get done selling shoes and your customer doesn't say thank you so much, you've missed something. My doctor used to say when we go to leave the exam room as a technician, I would prep the patients for eye exams and eye surgery. And he used to say that if you go to put your hand on that exam room door to push it and walk out that door, if the patient does not do some form, does not express some form of a thank you, you stop short. You just did the transaction. You didn't do the thing that makes them, they just can't help but say thank you. Even the crankiest, meanest patient, if you work hard enough, you can get them to say some version of thank you. And it's the same way in our work. You know, Kenneth, when you get done with a speech, when people come up, back when we were live and people would come up for stage side selling, they'd come up and say, oh my gosh, I love your energy, or I love your fill in the blank. They're already telling you what resonates. And those are the things we need to be listening for.
That was fantastic. And let me turn off.
Hey, every time a bell rings, a sale is on the line. You know, we will just stop this podcast right now if that small ding was a sales opportunity.
I'd love to say an angel gets its wings, but every time that happens, it's when I get another spam text message from
I know,
or a robocall is coming. So then how are you evolving now as somebody that's had a 20-year career in speaking, and how are you dealing with that as a virtual speaker? I mean, you've developed some new programs. I know you've got a virtual customer service training solution, but how have you seen that sort of evolve your own speaking business to being an online consultant, if you will?
Sure. Well, lucky for me that the very in-depth customer service virtual experience was in place 4 years ago. And so I got lucky with that. I didn't have to scramble and create it. But what I did have to do is figure out how my business model is going to change. So we could talk about this all day, but my short answer is I didn't change my content very much because it's universal. It works virtually as well as in person. So yay for me. That's really good. The flip side of what I did have to figure out is how am I going to build the model differently? So as I just mentioned, stage side selling is where my business was made. I'm a 2-for-1 spin business owner. What that means is every time I speak, I need at least 2 people to come up and want to hire me or recommend me. And if I have a 2-for-1 spin at every job, guess what? I never have to pick up the telephone. And I don't want to do cold selling. I like warm and hot. Don't we all? Wouldn't you rather pick up the phone and call a hot lead than a cold one, right? And so I always had that to go by. And so again, I'm in the start of my 24th year, and I have never had to do outbound marketing, push marketing, except in the first year of my business. I sent out 36 direct mail postal letters to my niche industry, and that's all I ever did. Everything else after that was pull marketing. But you know what? Pull marketing doesn't work the same way anymore, at least for me. So now I've had to be thinking, how can I virtually imagine right now?
Figure out a way to interrupt everybody.
Yeah, right. How am I virtually going to get people to come up to the stage when there is no stage? I told somebody the other day, my most unfavorite part of this new normal for us is that when I'm done working, and I'm being very transparent here, and I know you're going to agree with this. It used to be when I was done working, and this is not ego talking, this is fact, people would clap. Sometimes they would stand up, and sometimes people would come and say, wow, you were amazing. And I got to tell you, that is 3/4 of the reason I love this job is I love the attention. I love the applause. I wrote an article called 12 Weeks Without Applause. And it's how I felt after the first 3 months of not getting anybody to clap. I told my family one night at dinner, I'm going to tell you guys a story. When I'm done, I want you to clap. And they started laughing, thinking I was being funny. I'm like, no, I'm serious. I want you guys to clap. Because now, Kenneth, don't you notice that when we're done with our programs now, you get a little thing on your screen that says, this meeting has ended. And then I'm making chili. Like,
oh, that's right.
A totally different experience. Yeah. My model had to change, not my work.
You know, I've been on and off as speaker for not that many years, but it doesn't fit my ego. I try to be more humble than that.
I got to write that down. Well, hold on. It doesn't fit my ego. Yeah, I'm writing that down. You keep talking. I'm writing this down.
It's a virtually small applause for an extra large size ego. But, you know, to be quite honest, I know when I get the applause or they come up after, it's also a potential sale. And I know I've helped somebody. I really swear to you, feel the most beneficial thing that I get, whether it's a referral or a rating or anything else. I feel like if somebody's come up and talked, then I've connected somehow and I've helped them solve some problem for them. You don't get that now with a lot of virtual presentations. And I get it, but you don't get that in a Zoom call. I mean, if you think just relatively speaking, when you have a meeting with somebody in person, you have a meeting and that's great, but it's a lot of that other stuff you get. It's like when you finish that meeting and you walk down the hall with that person, there's so much more that you get there that you don't get on a Zoom call. And it's a little,
or we take it to the next level and we go to the golf course together, or you teach me how to dive because we have a professional relationship and that's your passion. And I know zero about it, but I want to know about it. Think about how that connection grows. If I was the vendor that you're selling to and we get to do an adventure together. I mean, these things, we're just missing out on those golf course moments.
I've seen several of your speeches. You get a lot of laughs and applause. I was a failed stand-up comic. I love that. I mean, I used to love at the time sitting there with a cigarette and a watered down whiskey telling, 20 people dumb jokes, but you'd get laughs and it's a lot of fun. It doesn't feed your ego. It's like an endorphin. But for somebody like you who does make people laugh, it's hard to do the bottled water joke. It doesn't translate the same way on a virtual stage. And so I think it's actually tougher for people that are like to have a little more fun on stage and be silly. How are you trying to translate the bottled water? Are you able to leverage that on your virtual presentations?
I have not used how how would I describe that? I don't like the word shtick, but I don't have another
Yeah,
one come
yeah.
to mind, is because I can teach the core concept with that without ever using the bottle gag. I think gag's a better word. I don't have to do that at all, but
Prop.
the prop, but it
Yeah.
keeps people engaged. I have found most of my virtual work has been pretty serious so far.
Yeah.
They have a pain and I'm bringing a solution, because right now with our economy and with our world the way it is and with the fear that's out there, although I still want it to be interactive and enjoyable, I have found that even funny and witty is not appropriate in today's environment. And so I do a little bit of that, but very little. And I don't do any prop work at all right now. I may put that in at some point. And what I might do is put it in as a video clip from a live performance.
Right.
Because I've got several that were spectacular in crowd response. So I could hear myself saying on a, let's say a virtual, now I want you to take a look at this and I'll talk to you about it on the back end. And then they get to see what it was meant to be like without me trying to redo it right now, because think how silly it would look. And I know we're audio only right now, but you and I can see each other. And
Yeah.
if I did the gag with the water bottle right now, it would look really forced and awkward. And so I think showing it from a live setting is probably the way I'll go.
Yeah.
But I just haven't needed to so far.
Prop comics are not doing well in a Zoom world. So Gallagher is hurting.
Yeah, and
But-
hypnotists. I don't know if they can hypnotize over the airwaves or not, but everybody has to, has to be able to make a shift. But I think the important lesson to get out of this part of our conversation is I can't be shifting to try and accommodate my needs because I've always done it this way. I shouldn't be trying to shift to keep doing what I've always done. I think that there's something really magical about saying, what can I do now that I could not have done when I was on platform live? And what do I need to be doing to accommodate for hybrid programming, which is right around the corner? Some people are already doing lots of it where you're there live, but yet it's being broadcast out to hundreds or thousands of people. That's going to be a different beast too. So we really have to keep up with a changing time. It's similar to the restaurant business. Look at all the creativity they've come up with, just trying to stay in business.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dial it back then to customer service again. Let's talk about the 10-cent decision.
Sure. My favorite topic.
I love the design too, the flip one side to the other with guiding principles for customer service staff and then on the other side for leadership. Has that book helped you a lot during the pandemic?
It came out in August of last year, and it's called The 10-Cent Decision, How Small Change Pays Off Big. And so if people are wondering what you're talking about, if you read it from the front cover to the middle, you do that if you're a team member. And then if you're a leader, you flip it over actually and read it from the back cover to the middle with no duplication of content. So actually, I believe in an integrated approach to customer service. So everybody on the team should read the whole book. But from writing books, we need an avatar, somebody that we're focused on when we're writing. And when I wrote the book, the first draft, I kept going, because it was all going to just be one direction, right side up all the way through. I kept putting, if you're a team member or a leader, if you're this, and I kept realizing I'm not being very clear on who I'm talking to. And somebody in my mastermind group recommended, what if you write one side of the book just to the people who are on the front lines delivering the service? And then you write the other half of the book for people who can make decisions. And so that's how that came to be. And I actually wrote the book as a way for everybody to get on the same page before I come in to speak. So I never put it out there trying to be, a Wall Street Journal or a New York Times bestseller. That was never my intention. It's meant to be a guide for those who are bringing me in to speak. So the short, blunt answer is no, the sales of the books are way, way down because it's part of a package deal with me coming to speak.
Right.
So there's another example. Are we going to take these books and send them out to individual homes? Because that's where people are working from. It doesn't make any sense to send a case of books to a company because nobody's in the company. They're all remote. Right. And so we've really iced the book quite a bit right now, but that's okay because it's evergreen. And when we come out on the back side of this, it's going to be ready to take off just like it would have if we'd stayed live.
It's well worth $26.95, not 10 cents. Thank you. Well worth the price. So you got to go buy it. But I'm also curious, when you take these principles that you teach, I'm certain that very often, because you're in customer service and you do bring the leadership to that realm, but this is just as important a topic to marketing, to sales, to HR, to accounting. How do we sort of bring all of that together so that different departments take a much better appreciation for customer service and customer experience as well? Because there's such a disconnection of most departments Probably with the exception, at least with sales, because sales will also often hear directly from the customer what the problems are. If there's maybe a B2B relationship, but B2C especially, they're not hearing that. The customer service team's the only one fielding so many of these nasty phone calls.
Sure. And what I find often when I work with companies is that you have the sales force that's out there, doing the casting, the hook, and they reel them in. But they aren't thinking about what happens after the fish comes on the boat. They are thinking about the promises they've made, how to close the deal, how to get rid of indecision. That's what the sales team is focused on. Now they hook the fish and they throw it in the boat and they go, wipe their hands and they walk away and they go on to catch the next fish. Now I'm the guy in the boat and I'm the one that has to make good on the promise that you made as a salesperson. I have to deal with the complaining when we didn't meet the deadline or whatever those things are. I see a lot of conflict between those two pieces because they don't walk in the shoes of the other. So when I wrote the book with the idea of an integrated approach, and what I mean by that is people see it from the other guy's shoes. If you're a frontline person, you understand why the boss makes the decision that he or she does. And on the flip side, if you're the boss who's been away from the front line for a really long time, you've forgotten what it takes to deal with those chronic complainers, and you're not putting policies in place or whatever you need to do to make sure systems are smooth. So here's what I did with the book that I like. The chapters are really short. They're anecdotal at the beginning to keep your attention. Then we go straight to the point I'm trying to make and the actions I want you to take. But I think this is the most important part of the book. Every chapter, there's a series of several questions at the end that I don't know the answers to. It's your job to ask yourself or your team to gather and ask each other these questions and come away with a solution that fits your company with your story. So of course the book has to be more generic in nature because it's not written for just one industry. It's written for all industries. That means there'll be one chapter that you read that's spot on for a challenge that you have. And there may be another chapter where you go, yeah, this doesn't really apply to us. Let's move on. And that's the beauty of it. It's almost like a cookbook, and that you get to read and react to the chapters that apply as a team. And that's where I think the magic comes in. When people choose to use the book that way, I think some really great stuff can happen.
At least this point in my career, one of the things I wish more people would cross-train in is customer service, and I don't see it nearly enough. It's the kind of things that keep leaders at the C level up a lot, but all the attention so often gets focused on fields that I've focused in, like marketing and technology and sales and things like that. I don't know. It's just some of the things that the level of service that companies are providing, not just at a customer service level, but at all forms of service, is the kind of thing that's driving so much of the experience today. And well, it's even what you reference all the time, the baker and the cashier. It's how the two of them work together. So
let's get that quote in there.
Yeah,
and that quote is, it doesn't matter how good the baker is if the cashier spits in your cake, right? It doesn't, we aren't thinking about all the pieces. And
wait, let me finish that, because this will be more like your normal speeches. That way you'll feel like you got the applause at the end.
I love the applause.
Because that's your close,
Best round of applause I've gotten all week. But one of the reasons, backing up one step, that I think, I can't prove this, but my gut says, the reason that a lot of companies don't focus on customer service or customer experience is because those in power believe that customer service is common sense. And when you think about it, I'm surprised there is many of us in customer service speaking as there is, because my husband said one time, doesn't it really come down to just being nice? I'm like, yes, if everybody could be nice, I probably wouldn't have a job, but it goes way, way beyond that. And the reason that common sense doesn't work is none of us fit the same 5 criteria. Here's the criteria that goes into your common sense. The environment you were raised in, the era in which you were born. Number 3 is your general personality. Are you outgoing, extrovert, can talk to anybody? Are you introverted, you're on the front line and you have trouble making eye contact with people? So your personality. The place where you used to work. What was their culture and how were you raised, so to speak, in customer service? And then finally, who are you working next to today? Who's your role model for great service? Now, if we were to answer those 5 questions, there's no way that you and I have the exact same report card coming out of that situation, because we've had 2 very different lives. We're 2 different people, 2 different fingerprints, right? And so what's common sense to you that you would say, oh my gosh, duh, maybe is foreign to me, and I wasn't raised or had that as my example in how to treat other human beings. What does all that long thing that I just said mean? We have to teach it. We cannot assume that people show up and know it. We have to teach the culture, which is how the eye care place where I used to work, healthcare, how we became so successful. We had a culture, we taught and trained it. And if you as an employee couldn't fit into that culture, you did not last with us. And that's really how we drill down to the key point.
So one of the things we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, sort of in prep for this, was how all speakers in the industry are having to reposition themselves, at least to some degree. Nobody has a crystal ball when speaking gigs will get perfectly back to normal, but how are you looking at your own brand? I mean, you're somebody that's well recognized as an expert in your field, and you'll continue to be recognized at that. But there's a reemergence of gigs. There are speaking gigs that are canceled now, that won't come back, that may have been some of your favorites. There's obviously a lot of the corporations that have had some changes with how they're looking at it. There are a lot of people in the event business that have lost their jobs and moved on. Maybe they got something that was more stable, if you will, than what it is today. How do you sort of look at yourself, though, reemerging in this market to go grab some of those big keynotes like you were getting before?
I actually changed my model to be pretty reactive. And so I'm getting requests that are different from my normal work. And instead of seeing that as, well, I'll do this until normal comes back. Mm-hmm. Like you said, we don't have a crystal ball, but my gut says we're quite a ways out from it going back. And so I don't try and make it be what it used to be. I just keep adjusting and moving with the flow. And I like sticking with the water metaphor that we have going with your love of water. It's like I can either fight it or I can put up a sail and go with where the wind's going to take me. I can pull the sail down and just completely float and see what happens. And to me, that's how I remove the internal stress instead of fighting it and paddling against the current and the wind, which some of my colleagues are doing. They're fighting so hard to get back to where it used to be. My reaction has been a little bit of a peaceful time, as best I can. Let's just see where this is going to take us. Now, the thing is, I'm 56 years old. And I was planning on speaking until 60, 65, something like that. So this is about the time that I should already be thinking about a very slow exit out of that cold pool. What does a 5 to 8 year retirement plan look like? And so even if we were in the best of times, I already should start thinking about what does it look like as I begin to phase out? And does out mean completely done? Take my shingle down, I'm done? Or does it mean that it's switching to something else? And those are some of the things that are going through my mind during this time, because I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where retirement is in my sights, where some of my friends, they're, in their early 30s and they've got, a couple decades in front of them of having to earn a good living. So I think it depends on who you're talking to and what their story is.
We briefly spoke about this as well a few weeks ago, and how you look at social media as something that helps you, especially now in the world where everybody's locked in. You're a well-recognized speaker as an expert in your field, but you're not somebody that's with a gazillion followers that's self-promotional all the time, to your credit. You don't spend all day on social, neither do I, but you've still got to devote some attention to that. And that's also looked at, especially for keynote speakers like yourself. How do you sort of look at social as a tool and as a need, and it's just something you may or may not want to do during your normal day?
Right. Actually, when it comes to social media, I was a little slow getting to the platforms because honestly, I think social media is kind of dumb. And I remember the first time I heard about this, I believe it was Shep Hyken who said it, is that he used the platforms as an example. He said, Facebook is like going to a party and you're flipping through your photo album and telling everybody about your trip. Twitter is like you're sitting on your porch and a parade is going by and people are shouting things out to you as the parade goes by. And I remember thinking, yeah, I don't need all of this noise. So I really didn't join in very early. And here's the big reason why. I am a one-person show with one team member. So if I'm going to stay a one-person show, which I wanted to do, I like keeping money in my pocket rather than paying a whole bunch of people to do stuff for me. There wasn't enough hours in the day. And I had to really sit down and say, where can I differentiate myself? I would have to work really hard to be noisy enough on social to get somebody's attention. And so I had to make a decision, is that I don't need to be famous to have a very successful business. So my level of gigs, my level meaning name, companies, or even the size of the job itself, is probably below most of the people that you would compare me to. And I had to learn really early on, that doesn't bother me. I only want to work about 35 times per year. So you can do the math on that. It doesn't take very long to find, let's say 30 to 50 gigs and have them be good gigs. Mm-hmm. So I don't actually need social media to achieve my goals for my business. But I had to decide to push my ego aside, because you're absolutely right, Kenneth. When I am compared to somebody who has all kinds of traction, they're going to say, well, person X is probably better to keynote our event because look, she only has X number of followers. And so you're right. I may lose some of the big gigs, but I'm willing to do 2 or 3 little ones that are easy to scoop up. And that matches the one that the big person did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, the corporations pay better and the trade associations pay better than the conferences anyway, for the most part. But, you know, I remember not that long ago, a really, really nice person who had somebody on his staff, one of his minions, write something about, when looking for a keynote speaker, look for somebody with a lot of followers. And I thought that was extremely interesting and bothersome. And I saw a panel not that long ago about a topic, and it had a lot of well-known speakers, well-known names with a lot of massive numbers of followers that were speaking on these topics that I knew they were not experts in. They're experts in other fields that I have a high level of respect for them. But for example, if you were to take Seth Godin to talk about customer service, is he an expert in all things that I think he's fantastic in? Absolutely. But am I going to listen to him, or am I going to listen to you more, somebody that's practicing in the field? I'm going to hire you all day long.
And the fact of the matter is that I will never, ever, ever have enough social media traction to compete against or with a Seth Godin, nor would I even try. To me, we are 2 very different products.
Absolutely.
And as long as I'm really clear what my product is, there are plenty of people who would choose me not because I'm better than him, it's because I'm a better match to what they want. And so I think people have to get really clear, and this is true for people listening who are not speakers. You got to be really clear what you're trying to be, because if you're all things to all people, you're going to fail. So we go back to my McDonald's example from earlier. It's like you and I have probably both hit our share of McDonald's in our life. I know I have. And if anybody listening knows what value meal number 1 is, you know what those ingredients are, and you already have gone through the drive-through way too many times in your life. Right. But if all of a sudden today, McDonald's decided that they were going to be a 5-star restaurant with, you know, $50 steaks and white linen tablecloths, they would not make the money they're making, or at least they wouldn't make it the same way, and they would confuse their brand. So the short version is get clear on your brand and all the things you have to do to feed that brand. So for example, when I show up at a job, back live, when I showed up for a job, if the chairs weren't the way they wanted them, I'd be on the floor helping them move chairs an hour before go time. Seth Godin wouldn't be helping move chairs. He would be in the green room, rightfully so. Those are 2 different brands of speakers, and I just own my brand and I'm comfortable with it. So the idea of trying to be self-made famous was never part of my goal. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying we need to be clear on what do we want to achieve. People who are putting out thought leadership on a drip, drip, drip daily basis, and they come on your show and they say, well, I'm a thought leader and I put something out every day. My question would be, is anybody reading it?
Yeah, agreed. Laurie, I asked this of all my guests, and I got to ask you, even though you're landlocked in Illinois, what's your favorite kind of shark and why? What's the customer service shark?
The customer service shark. Well, I thought you meant real sharks, because I got to
real
tell
sharks.
you. Real sharks. Okay. Well, I have to tell you, and I'm not making this up, The first movie my mother ever took me to was Jaws, if you can
Sure.
believe that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what she was thinking, because I was a little girl and that was not a good movie to see. So I
Yeah.
have to tell you, I am a little frightened of sharks, and I love the ocean though. If I could live by the ocean, that's where I would live, not landlocked in Illinois. But when I'm in the water, every time something touches me, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a shark. And so I don't know that I could pick a favorite. So I guess it'd have to be Great White, because isn't that what Jaws was?
It was indeed. Yeah, it's probably the best and worst real life representation of what sharks are. I mean, you have to respect them because they're the apex predator, but at the same time, that has totally made everybody freak out for reasons that are not real 99% of the time when I'm in the water. Well, Laurie, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're
I've
going to
been
be
waiting
asked
for
today?
this part because you don't give us a preview. So,
All right, number 1, Chicago Cubs or Chicago White Sox?
oh, Cubs all the way. Finally got that
Yeah.
World Series.
All right, number 2, Quarter Pounder or Big Mac?
Oh, value meal number 1, Big Mac all the way. Which my butt will tell you I've done one too many times. But
All right.
as I'm sitting in the drive-thru, I'm always saying to myself, you can start the diet tomorrow. You can start the diet tomorrow. In fact, that sounds good. I might go get that for lunch today.
That's funny. Number 3, customer service or customer experience?
It's customer experience.
No, not what you speak on, but what you value more.
Oh, I absolutely speak on what I value. It's the experience all the way.
Number 4, since you're in Illinois, and I was in Metropolis, Illinois, not that long ago, I'm going to ask you, Christopher Reeve or Henry Cavill?
Christopher.
Chris, thank you. Pajama outfit, but still much better. All right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, well, then I have a counter question. What's the topping? Is there a topping? Because that makes a difference.
You get to choose.
Okay.
You got
So if
you
it's
got one
biscuits,
meal that involves one of the
Ooh.
two.
I'm going to go biscuits with really good butter on it.
Oh, good point. I thought you would throw in gravy or something since you asked for a
Oh,
topping.
no, not much on the gravy, but cornbread is too iffy. If it's my very favorite cornbread, then maybe I'd have to win out, but biscuits are good no matter what, and cornbread is very iffy.
Yeah. So, Laurie, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of the book, hire a very good speaker for when the world opens back up, and more?
Or even now, when the world feels shut down. Even
and
now, which is where
gets
I
an
do all my work.
amazing customer service virtual training right now.
That's right. It's at laurieguest.com, and I'm sure they'll find this in the show notes, but my name is Laurie, and then the last name is Guest, like a guest speaker.
Well, thank you for being my guest on A Shark's Perspective. Thank you so much, Laurie.
It's my pleasure. Hope to see you in the water someday.
Amen. So there was my conversation with Laurie Guest, a keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and authority on customer service excellence, and author of The 10-Cent Decision, How Small Change Pays Off Big. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, everyone chases what we do and what they think we do well. What customers are often thinking of, though, as she describes this very well, is what we're not doing beyond that level of service. She describes it in what she calls it 4 rings, and most leaders stop at the first 2, but she's pushing beyond that, like with augmented reality as an example. Just think about what you want from a brand. It's often more than how they're serving you today. So in providing service to a brand, think about going beyond that reality that is today. Second, Laurie says that the reason that a lot of companies don't focus on service or experience is that they think much of this is common sense. But she says that common sense doesn't work because of the differences we all experience. She describes it in 5 points, like the environment you were raised in, the era in which you were born, your general personality, the culture of the place where you used to work, where you received training, and who you're working next to today, who's your role model for great service. I'm paraphrasing it a bit, but I love how she says that there's no way it's the same because your education and what you refer to as common sense may be different than mine. How you answer that will always be different than the way I do. It simply means that we have to teach it and not assume it as a skill learned somewhere else, especially when your specific brand's individual culture and promise to its customers is your own. So double or triple down on teaching your culture and what you expect. Third, for someone who's a speaker and who also helps pick speakers for conferences, I always have the utmost respect for people like Laurie, who have achieved a lot in their speaking career and have a real level of actual expertise, versus some, not all, who simply have big names and big follower counts. I often worry about some of the influencers having too much influence on specific subjects they get picked to speak about on occasion. So as Laurie explains it well, she may not have the social media traction someone else does, but she may just be niched as a better match for a topic. And I hope that is something that more event planners will consider. Look at the content and level of expertise other than just a lot of vanity metrics. And of course, Seth Godin is brilliant. That's the worst example I could have given, but there's a lot of big speakers who get measured more by follower count, real or not, than the level of expertise that they bring to a stage. And when you think about the level of service that an audience may get, that takeaway for what they'll use from the speech, like other things, the actual content most often matters more. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Now let's go out there and acquire a lot of customers, but the ones you get, make sure you serve them well. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.